This is an interesting question. How could there be a connection between the rise of Islam, which we think about the death of Muhammad in the middle of the 7th century, and the establishment of Charlemagne's empire a century and a half later in Northern Europe? Well, this powerful suggestion was made by a historian called Henri Pirenne in 1937 in a book called Muhammad and Charlemagne. And essentially his argument was that the rise of Islam and the spread of Islam, the rapid spread of Islam throughout the Near East and North Africa and into Spain caused a power vacuum in Europe because Pirenne hypothesized that Islam and Christianity would be necessarily hostile to one another, and that the Muslims, by taking control of the Mediterranean, would have been trying to stop any kind of commerce or communication between the Christian West and the now very Muslim East. So in other words, it was based on this assumption that the relationship between Christianity and Islam is always going to be a hostile relationship. And historians since then have really pulled back from this. In particular, historians are now looking for the many different kinds of connections which existed between the Islamic world and the early medieval West. And they're finding these connections all over the place. They're finding that there was very free and frequent movement of peoples and goods between the Islamic caliphates and the Islamic kingdoms of Spain and the north. They're finding, in fact, that one of these connections was that Christians, because Northern European Christians, because they didn't have very much wealth to exchange with Islam for all the exotic goods that they wanted to get, were selling each other into slavery to the Muslims. So far from there not being any connection between Islam and the Christian West, there were plenty of connections, and they were very lucrative connections on both sides. So if Charlemagne doesn't come to power because of this power vacuum, does he have any connection with this Islamic world? And he does, absolutely, but again, it's not a violent one. What we know is that Charlemagne, and indeed his grandfather, Charles Martel, had a negative relationship with the Muslims on their immediate borders, that is, the Muslim kingdoms of Spain, which shared the border of the Pyrenees with the Frankish kingdom of Charlemagne. And that was not an easy relationship, and there were plenty of battles and skirmishes between those two. But the Muslims of Spain are not the same as the Muslims of Baghdad. And in fact, Charlemagne had a very, very cordial relationship with the Muslim caliph in Baghdad, Harun al-Rashid, and this is in fact the Muslim caliph of the Arabian Nights, so he was a great and legendary figure as well as Charlemagne. And in fact, Charlemagne and Harun al-Rashid exchanged gifts on a regular basis, the most famous of which is that Harun al-Rashid sent Charlemagne an elephant called Abu Abbas, who then lived out his life, poor creature, in the wilds of Germany, and archaeologists have even found his bones. So there is a very close connection between the growing wealth and political consequence of the early medieval kingdom and the empire, in fact, of Charlemagne and Islam, but it is not necessarily this hostile connection that was posited by earlier historians.